What's poppin'? In today's video, I will be talking about Diary of a Wimpy Kid. More specifically, an LLB from the Loaded Diaper subreddit called Rich and Famous. Now, if you're like most rational thinking human beings and have no idea of what any of those words I just said mean, let me explain. On Reddit, there is a subreddit based on the Diary of a Wimpy Kid books, named after Roderick's band in the series. People on this subreddit make their own Diary of a Wimpy Kid stories by taking assets from the books and reworking them to make a brand new story. Sometimes this can be done well, like Rich and Famous. Other times, however... Today I'm going to talk about Rich and Famous by Jay. Jay is also well known on the subreddit for writing the classic 25 Years Later, which, if you couldn't tell from the title, takes place 25 years after the events of Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Now, if you know about 25 Years Later and Rich and Famous, then you probably know that Rich and Famous is an alternate universe take on 25 Years Later, so I should probably talk about 25 Years Later. But this is my channel, not yours. I'm gonna do whatever the fuck I want, bitch. Our story begins with our favorite protagonist, Greg, coming back to Plainville after 7 years of living in Boston. Greg moved to Boston because he got a job working at Fun Brain Games, where he's now the CEO. The first thing Greg does after showing up in Plainville is go to his best friend Rowley's house. Greg, still up to his manipulative act from the books, threatens to sue Rowley if he doesn't come with him. Rowley, reasonably not wanting to get sued, just goes with him. After showing up at the hospital where Greg's dad, Frank, is currently getting treated for cancer. Yeah, sorry to those Frank Heffley stands out there, but he doesn't make it. Greg decides to deliver a few choice words to his father. Afterwards, Frank tries to tell Rowley that Greg is gay, but Greg tries to suffocate Frank with his pillow. After that whole interaction, Greg and Rowley go back to Rowley's house for the night. In the morning, Rowley wakes Greg up with breakfast. Greg sees one of the old comics he and Rowley made. He takes it thinking that he could sue Rowley with it if he really wanted to. Not that he would. Right? Greg tries to call Frank at the hospital, but his mom and older brother are there, so he hangs up. Greg tells Rowley what happened, and Rowley suggests that Greg should talk to his family. Greg and Rowley then go to Greg's old house. When they get there, they see that the door is unlocked, and they go in. While in the house, Greg decides to go and get the ring he found and hid in the Ugly Truth. On his way out of the house with the ring, he ran into his little brother Manny. Manny, much like Greg, left Plainville to become a successful businessman. But unlike Greg, Manny failed and returned a year later. Manny had a letter he wanted to give to Frank, basically apologizing for acting the way he did. Greg sees the letter and decides to burn the letter because he feels that Frank was a bad father to them and doesn't deserve an apology for anything. While Greg is burning the letter, however, Roderick, Susan, and Frank show up at the house. Frank is there because they don't have money to keep him in the hospital for his cancer. That's why you moved to Canada. Free healthcare for life. Hey Canada, please sponsor me. Frank tries to guilt Greg by saying that he's gonna die because Greg didn't want to chip in even a cent to his father's recovery. This kind of backfires because Greg decides to punch Frank a couple of times. Now, I don't know if Frank dies here, but in 25 Years Later, he died around this time in this story, so I'm just gonna assume that Frank did indeed die here. Mostly because then it means that Greg is, responsible for first-degree murder, which is always fun. Greg gets in his car and leaves, but not before showing Susan the ring he hid from them this entire time. The ring that they could have sold and used the money to help treat Frank's cancer, so that he could potentially not die. Rowley, understandably freaked out thanks to the whole first-degree murder thing, decides not to let Greg stay at his house again and just get out of the car and run away. Greg, finally realizing what he did, starts crying over the fact that his one friend now hates him. Greg decides to sleep in his car when Fregley comes up to him and talks to him about things. It's not really that important, it just convinced Greg that he should make things up with Rowley. How he's gonna make up for that whole first-degree murder thing, I don't know. Well, he was kinda rich, so... Greg shows up at Rowley's house to apologize. At first, Rowley doesn't want to talk to Greg, but then he decides to. Probably forgetting about the whole first-degree murder thing, but water under the bridge. They have a pretty good time, all things considered, just walking around and talking like friends again. They walk over to their old middle school, where Greg plans to tell Rowley that he likes him. Yeah, that's pretty important. Basically, Greg really likes Rowley, more than friends. But as they're talking, Greg trips and the comic he took from Rowley falls out of his pocket. Rowley realizes that Greg was being serious when he said he was gonna sue Rowley. Rowley wants to know why Greg brought him into this, but Greg refuses to tell him. Probably because it has something to do with Greg liking Rowley. Rowley chases Greg up to the roof of the school, demanding an answer to his question. But as Greg is on the edge of the building, he confesses to Rowley that he loves him. Rowley responds by saying, "I know, Greg. I love you too," as he Sparta kicks Greg off the building. Come to think of it, if Rowley does love Greg, that's probably why he forgave him for the whole first-degree murder thing. The story ends with Greg paralyzed, lamenting on the fact that he always wanted Rowley to act like him. But the second that Rowley did do what Greg would do, he's the one who had to suffer for it. So the moral of the story is, if you have a manipulative friend who likes you, you'll get to one day Sparta kick them off your old middle school building. And if you are that one manipulative friend with a crush on one of your best friends, don't go near tall buildings, or threaten to sue your best friend.